I'm Khaliah,
And I'm Des.
and we're back at it again with another episode of Above All Things. And this episode will specifically be talking about the challenge of burnout.
Yeah, I probably look burnt out right now with my hair in this bun. If you're listening, you can't see me, which is probably in your favor. But yeah, burnout is definitely something that I think all of us have been struggling with since the pandemic started. Whether it's frontline workers who are working around the clock, or those who are working in the service industry, moms that are having to homeschool their kids and also work at the same time, fathers doing the same thing. It's just been a lot for everyone. Um,
Mm.
I know for me personally, after graduating, having not worked full time before, year round, it was difficult for me because I had no concept of work life balance. And so, starting work full time for the first time from my living room in my tiny apartment, it definitely was hard to understand how to separate my work life from my home life and to give myself some time to process every day and just spend some time for myself.
Yeah, I know the same for me. I graduated during the pandemic, and then I started my first year teaching. I felt like I was kind of thrown into it. And then it's new for the teachers that I work with too, because then we started off the year doing virtual. So it's just been a hard, tiring year. It feels like it went by very fast
Yeah,
to me.
me
I
too.
was like, oh my God, May, the school year's ending. I'm so happy about that. But just to get into some signs of burnout, I know how we've talked a little bit about how we're experiencing it personally, but some signs of burnout that you might see and some things that we see in ourselves as well is extreme fatigue. I know I'm feeling this right now, especially as I'm closing out the school year. Um, I can see the end, and so I'm like crawling towards it. And it seems like now that my work is kind of winding down and it's coming summer, that there's more to do actually than when I started. And so I'm kind of trying to do everything and get everything done. And this is when emails are flooding in, like, I need you to do this and da 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 da. And even tonight, I'm just like, I got in bed and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna take a nap. Usually I don't, and usually I don't wake up from my naps until the next morning.
I was
But
surprised we got off to film this. I was like a nap. It's 9 p.m.
I'm trying to be a responsible adult. Um, but I was like, you know what, I'm gonna take a nap. I'm feeling that fatigue really bad. And another one is stress and anxiety. I know I get very bad anxiety. And it's just sometimes it's hard for me to function because sometimes I feel so overwhelmed with work that I almost don't want to do anything, and it's freaking me out that I'm not doing anything at the same time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, so those are two signs of burnout that I wanted to point out and talk about how I personally experienced them, and I know Des will talk about hers as well.
Yeah, I know extreme fatigue, stress and anxiety, definitely some things that have been on my plate since last year. Just, not just from work, but just also like family things that are going on and trying to juggle all of that. And I know one thing that definitely I struggled with in college and have gotten a little bit better at it, but definitely going through it now is, have from burnout starting to put things off that I should do now. And so that's one thing that I've been trying to work on, and whenever I see it, I'm like, okay, I'm starting to get overwhelmed because I see myself pushing this task to the side. So
Yeah.
for me, that's my red flag of I'm doing too much and I need to start slowing down and taking some time for myself so that I can make sure I'm prioritizing these tasks that need to get done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know a lot of times, we see burnout, we experience burnout, but we don't know why it happens. And so often, we think of it as like, this is your job, it's what you're supposed to do. And we think of burnout as something that's totally career oriented, but burnout can manifest in so many different settings. It's not just about your job. You can have burnout as a parent trying to raise your children. You can have burnout as someone in a relationship and coexisting or trying to work out day-to-day relationship things with your significant other. So there's a lot of different areas where you can have burnout. It's definitely not just for jobs. So don't feel bad when you see yourself having burnout in those areas of your life. Um, a lot of times it can happen, when you have an inability to say no to certain tasks from fear of letting someone down. And
Yeah.
that really comes up, one, it can and show up on a job setting because, of course, you don't want to let your boss down and feel like you're letting a coworker down and there's money tied to it because that's your job. And so a lot of times we just keep saying yes and yes and yes to these tasks until they pile up and you're one person, you can only do so many things.
Yeah.
And so you've kind of put yourself in a hole because don't you don't want to say no and cause someone to look at you a different way.
Yeah.
um I know, as with our families, sometimes it can also manifest in this way. You have family members that need certain things, you have your children that need certain things. And so we keep saying yes, yes, yes to everyone when we're also trying to juggle a job or trying to juggle other areas of our life, not realizing that you don't have to say yes to every single thing. Obviously, for your kids, you provide to them the basic necessities that they need: love, food, water, all that kind of stuff. But if they want to go, to Six Flags or something one weekend and they've gone to hang out with their friends the weekend before, maybe they can chill out one weekend and that weekend can just be for you.
Yeah.
Just things like that are how, burnout can show up in situations like that, because obviously kids is something where it's just so hard to say no to your kids sometimes. Um,
Yeah. I know with that inability to say no, especially when you're new to something, I'm gonna relate this to me since I'm a first year teacher. Sometimes you want to make a good impression and you're just like, yes, I can do that. Yes, I can do that. And then you don't realize what kind of toll it's taking on you. Because I noticed when I'm doing a whole lot of things, it takes away from myself and it also takes away from, if I'm, if you ask me to do this, it's taking time away from my kids that I'm supposed to be working with. Um, so it's kind of all about prioritizing your time to that and making sure you know what your priorities are. Sometimes it is very hard to say no, especially when you're in certain positions where you want to make a good impression or you're new and you just kind of want everybody to have a good opinion of you or whatever it may be. So sometimes it's hard to say no, but when you see those signs of burnout in yourself, make sure you put yourself first in some kind of way.
mhm. Yeah.
Another reason burnout happens is the inability to delegate when necessary. Oh, did you have? Go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say I think that point led into the other points that we have on here for why burnout happens.
Yeah. So we have the inability to delegate when necessary and also not taking time for yourself or taking care of yourself. I know Y'all, my room looks like a hot, hot mess right now. A hot mess. And that's just because I'm tired. I'm tired. And when I get the chance to sit down at home, my mind is racing with so many different things. And sometimes you don't even realize the space around you.
Yeah.
So you kind of get a moment to think to yourself. Like the other day I sat in my room and I was like, I might qualify for her Hoarders Buried Alive, you know? Like, it's looking a little, I'm being dramatic, but I
I
was like, it's looking a little bad for me.
Yeah, I think that happens though, like you know, like you were saying, like you just have so much going on in your mind and then your day. And so I think a lot of times, I know for me, because I'm trying to keep my mind so clear that my room is just a metaphor for what my brain should be. And so
Yeah,
like my mind, I've cleared it out to try and focus as much as I can on what needs to be done. And my room is the mess. and, and the true representation.
exactly. It's like when you have a lot going on up here, you don't realize that there's a lot going on in your environment too. Or maybe a lot you're neglecting so that you can give attention to something else. So not taking care of yourself is super important. And that goes into putting work in other things in the front of your life, you know, taking care of yourself. Sometimes I fall asleep without taking a shower. Y'all are some people are probably like, ew, that's gross. But listen,
It happens.
life. I'll get in the bed and I'm like, you know what? I'm not getting up. Like, I'm staying here. But it's important to take that time for yourself and be like, I'm gonna get in the shower, I'm gonna wash my face. Like, I mean, I'm glad y'all can't see the pimples right now for me neglecting myself.
I think
So
it's so important because like self-care is a really um a really big reason why burnout happens because we start to put those other parts of our lives ahead of ourselves. And a lot of times self-care can seem selfish to a lot of people because it's all about you. But really sometimes like really that's what we need, just a little bit of time for ourselves in order to get the energy that we need to give to other people. And I
yeah,
think I said before, like you can't give to other people if you're empty. So you have to make sure that you're replenishing and doing the things that you need to do for yourself in order to be able to pour into other people. And I know another reason why burnout can happen is because we, just like we aren't saying no when we should, we also don't delegate when we should. And a lot of times, you know, on work, this could be, you know, giving certain tasks to people who are, you know, that you're managing or things like that, trying to take on all the tasks yourself because you want to make it seem like, you know, if you're really the boss that you should be doing the work when really you have people that work for you for a reason. And so that's why you should be delegating tasks to them. I know also with our families, a lot of times we don't want to delegate certain tasks with them, but you know, that's why our family is there for us. You know, when we are blessed to have family that's close and family um that we're able to rely on, like when if we're blessed to have that, then we should definitely use it, you know, wisely and be able to lean on them and say, hey, you know, I just need 2 minutes to just think like, can you, you know, watch my dog, or can you like do this so that I can have this free time for myself for a little bit. And so, you know, learning how to say no when we need to, learning how to delegate, and then making sure that we're taking time for ourselves um, are some of the things that can kind of lead to burnout if we aren't doing that correctly.
and I like that you brought up the support system because even me at work, I have people, if I stay after school, they're like, Khaliah, go home. Like, Khaliah, go home. Or if I'm working during my lunch break, they're like, get away from the computer. A support system, even if it's not your family, it's good to have your family as a support system, but even your friends or your coworkers, somebody to tell you like, hey girl, like you're slipping a little bit, like let's get it together, or spend some time, let's go to dinner. Like
Mhm.
that's a form of self-care in itself as well. So I like that you brought up the support system because that's super important. Um, so now getting into our next thing is God says he won't put more on us than we can bear. But why does it feel like I'm being overwhelmed? Lord. So we just want to start off this point by saying nothing in life is going to be easy. I mean,
Mhm.
where this is not going to be the end of your tiring moments
Right.
or the time that you feel like you're overworked. Um, just because how I look at it is it's a part of a much bigger picture, like more than we can even imagine or think of. So um, I feel overworked now, but I feel like it's preparation for something more,
Mhm.
especially with me. I'm over here looking into graduate school, and I know that's going to be more work, and I'm probably going to be burnt out from that. But nothing in life is easy again, and it gets better. It's only, I think there's a scripture in the Bible that talks about how we suffer for a little while.
Mhm.
I can't remember the rest of it, but he kind of talks about how there's like a turnaround after the suffering. I Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, can you complete it?
Are you saying like weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning? I don't think
Something
that's what
like
you're saying.
that. I don't think it's that same one.
It's kind of the same concept though.
Yeah.
We both clearly need to read our Bible more.
Hey, I got the first half. I'm doing all right.
Burnout. We're so burnout. We're not even reading our Bible like we should.
But I mean, it honestly, it may feel like you're suffering. It's like, why am I so stressed out? Or I get home and I'm so tired. Some of you may not have time for your kids or for your spouse or your dog, whatever, whatever you come home to. And it just feels like there's so much on your plate, but it definitely gets better.
Mhm. Yeah, I one thing that's always stuck with me is like my dad's taught me that life is full of ups and it's full of downs. And whenever you're going through a time when you feel like there's a lot coming at you, it could be what you consider a down period, but it's always something to have in the back of your mind that no matter how long that down period lasts, there's an up period. Like there's going to be a moment where you're on an uphill climb. And I think that's been really important for me to remember the past year is that, I may be going through a tough time right now, but whatever I'm going through, God has me on that plan for a reason. um whatever, like you said, I'm going through something because he's molding me for something that's better. So there's something that I need to do that I couldn't do if I hadn't figured out how to overcome the obstacles that I'm facing right now.
Yeah.
um and one of the things that comes to mind as well is thinking about um when we go through these tough times. um, a lot of times it's so easy for us to wonder, why we're going through a tough time, and a lot of times we pray asking God to remove this tough time from us when
Yeah.
he has us in and he has us going through it for a reason. um, and I think God always answers our prayers. And so a lot of times, we'll get an answer and we'll start that uphill climb and the tough times won't be as bad, and that's God saying, you know what, it's time. I'm ready for you to move on to what I intended for you to go through. um and sometimes we keep going through our battles, and I think that's God telling us that you're going through something and you're burnt out, And so you've prayed to me to give you some sort of relief, and I'm telling you that you need to start implementing these self-care habits. You need to start taking time to pray, taking time for yourself, 10 minutes to um, to just decompress so that you can have the energy that you need to get through the rest of the day. And like we've talked about it before, like God created the earth in 7 days and he still rested. God, there's examples of Elijah when he was going through what he was going through in First Kings. The angel of the Lord stopped him and was like, "Hey, you're overwhelmed right now. You're stressed out. You need to eat, take a nap, eat." Like there's so many times in the Bible where, someone's like gone through a lot or like done a difficult task. And the next thing for them, the logical next step for them to do is rest.
Yeah.
So we should never think that we're just supposed to keep taking and taking and taking on all these challenges and not make time for ourselves. Like that's self-care is a big part of the Bible, like more than we realize, and there's nothing selfish about it. And I think that's something like a mindset that we have to change for ourselves.
Yeah. And then also we have to make sure that what we're picking up is from God and it's what we are meant to be doing, because sometimes we pick up things that God never intended for us to pick up, and that might be why you're feeling a lot of burnout. I know I've experienced this. I'm sure everybody's experienced a time where you picked up something and God was like, don't touch that. It's like touching the oven. Like when you're a kid, you touch that, somebody says, don't touch that. And you're like, I'm going to do it anyway. And God's like, look what you did. Like, look at you now. And it's so important to kind of stay in communication with God, especially while you're feeling burnt out, because then you can even take a lesson from that. Just because if you pick up something that maybe wasn't from God, now you're feeling burnt out and now you have to get back on track for your purpose. So it's just so important that we stay in communication with God and we really listen to what he wants us to do so that we can be in the position to receive it. Because sometimes when we kind of get off track, we have to reposition ourselves to receive the blessing that he has for us, when we could have already been in it. And that's not to say it's not okay to make mistakes, because I mean, I am no one to listen. I'm not casting no stones over here.
Me neither.
But stay in that communication with God so that you can prevent yourself and kind of keep yourself grounded in him so that you are in that posture and position to receive from him.
Yeah, and it's hard, it's hard. It's easier to sit here and say, stay in communication with God. It's hard because, sometimes God's answer is no, and we can take that silence for no, a lack of communication and not hearing him. And so when we feel like we aren't hearing things or we aren't getting the answers that we want, that's when we start to take matters into our own hands and take on projects that we aren't supposed to start. And that's when we can start to get burnt out. And that's why it's so important to pray and pray continuously and to practice patience, because God is very loud, even though he doesn't, like, there's no burning bushes, there's nothing like that, obviously, but he's still like, I cannot tell you how many times I've been stressed out or trying to get through a certain situation, and there's been emails sent and meetings canceled and all this, like just doors just wide, like God will open a door wide open. And so it's so important for us to just keep that constant communication with him, because there's little things, like you just have to look for those little things and look for God in everything that you do. Like, look for God in your email threads. Look for God in your meeting scheduling. Look for God in your transportation. Like he's speaking to us like in little things like that. And that can help us deal with burnout, because a lot of times burnout happens because we worry about things that are completely out of our control. And that's when the tiredness and the stress, I know stress and anxiety for me comes from when I'm sending out all these emails and trying to make sure I have the right tone and I'm saying the right thing and I'm not offending someone or I'm not
Yeah.
stepping on someone's toes. And I had to realize I cannot put someone's opinion of what I'm saying in my hands, because once I type that email and send it out, it's completely in God's hands. The only person who has the power to control how that person receives that message is God. And so
Yeah.
I literally will type, send, and release and just praying, you know what, God, I pray that they please receive that email in the way that I intended it to be received and hope for the best. And I think that that's one thing that we have to remember when we're trying to overcome burnout is like understanding that, you know, there we can only control ourselves and God has the rest. So we have to
Mm,
make sure that we're saying no to things we need to say no to, that we're delegating when we can delegate, and that we're taking care of ourselves. Because when we do that stuff, then God's going to put everything else into motion. So
mhm. Sorry, I'm over here laughing because I'm like, you've been praying after you send the email. You better than me.
I am, girl. You've been so many times
Like,
when you can
I,
send the email and in your mind just like think it's perfect. You're like, man, like I killed that email. And then the person emails back and they didn't understand anything you were saying. Like I've so many times, like me and my boss and I will have like something complicated that we're trying to message out, and we'll craft the email together and like send it so perfectly, and then we get the for the response back and it's like, oh, so and they're speaking a whole nother language. And so it's
mm,
little things like that that can cause so much stress, because then you're spending like 20 minutes worrying about this one person's response when you got 10 other projects to be worried about. So yes, I pray over my emails.
listen, I'm like, sometimes I type the email and then I'm like, listen, I'm gonna go to your office. I'm not, I'm not, I am not emailing you. But that's so true, especially about the tone of your email. Sometimes I sit there with my emails for 10 minutes and like, oh, Khaliah, that sounds mean. And then I'm like, listen, if they have a problem, they can come talk to me. They can come talk to me about my email. I don't know.
Honestly though, because I think like burnout and peace, I feel like they work very closely together. Like when you have peace, like the peace that God can provide, and for me the definition of peace is being able to, no matter what's going on, like the world around me could be falling apart, but within me I'm still okay because I know that God is in control. And
Yeah,
I feel like burnout plays into that, because when we're feeling burnout, it's because we feel out of control. We don't have that peace that we should have, or our peace is not as strong as we would want it to be. And so that's when burnout starts to seep in. And a lot of that really is just, like I said, just letting go and understanding that God's in control of everything. And once it leaves your capabilities, it's just out there.
yeah,
And he's you know he's over it.
yeah. And one thing I catch myself doing is um thinking ahead, like worrying about my future.
Mm.
I do that a lot, especially looking into graduate school, or if I have people, I'm like, oh, I have paperwork due on Friday and I haven't even started it. But I always go back to the scripture and I write it down often. Not that I forget it, but sometimes things are just so much better when you write it down. Um, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will worry about itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble.
Right.
So with every day, like the saying, some new every day. Like something new is going on every day. So why worry about the something new for tomorrow?
Mm.
Focus on what you have for today. If it's stressful, then it's stressful to you, but you add more stress when it's good to plan for the future, but plan with the understanding that God orders steps.
Mhm.
So never be concerned about, oh, I'm entering graduate school, or for some of you, like I'm getting married or I'm having children. Like there's so many things that we worry about. But when we remind ourselves that God's ordering my steps, it's in his hands. He knows literally everything, and we have to trust him with our future because he has it in his hands already.
Right.
And when you walk in that, again, that should bring peace, right? Just because we're human and we don't know tomorrow, we want to worry about it. But that should bring us peace that he's got it, and we don't have to be concerned about tomorrow. Worry about what's on your plate right now,
Yeah.
um
And when we worry so much about tomorrow, like we can think about tomorrow all we want, and it's good to plan about the future, but we can get so wrapped up in worrying about the next day that we're not actually taking steps in the here and now, that things that we can do in the moment to prepare for the next day. And so
yeah.
that's, I love that verse too, because it just reminds me that I can't see into the future. Only God knows, where I'm going to be in the next few days. He's got that covered. That's
Yeah.
so above me and beyond my pay grade that I don't need to be concerned with it, because it's just going to make me go crazy. It's going to
Yeah.
cause me to get burnt, even more burnt out. And so all that I am paid for is to do what I can today, make
Mm-hmm.
sure that, I've done all that I can today. That's like my motto for every day is, what have I done today? Have I done all that I can today?
Yeah.
That's just how I leave it. Like, it's my question.
Sometimes you miss out too when you try to live in the future, and worry about the future. You miss out on blessings that you could have received today, or ways you could have blessed somebody else today, because you're worried about so many different things. So definitely give those stresses to God, so that you can be your best you.
Mhm.
Now, sometimes the best you at the time is fatigue and anxiety, okay? Because I'm sitting in it right now. But never let that take away from your light and your ability to bless other people too. And I know that's hard, especially when you're feeling bad yourself. Like I don't feel the greatest right now, but continue to try and be a light. It's hard because it's something that you have to learn to do for some of us. I know for me personally, I kind of had to learn to continue to show my light, um, through pain or whatever, or fatigue, because I just got up from a nap. But continue to show that light, and we can get into what we can do about burnout. Because I know that's something that helps me, showing my light to other people, and them seeing my light is something that helps my burnout a lot.
Yeah. And I know that can be hard. Like, it can be hard to show your light when you can't even be a light for yourself. Uh,
Yeah.
and so like we totally understand that struggle. Like, we've already talked about some of the things that we've been through, and how we've had to how we've been working to overcome some of our struggles with even being a light for just ourselves. And
Yeah.
so that's where you have to start to overcome your burnout, because a lot of times burnout can come from a lack of confidence in yourself.
Yeah.
You're doing your job, but you're continually beating yourself up because you don't think that you're good enough, or you keep taking on these tasks because you're trying to feel like you're doing something or you're trying to prove your worth because you always feel like you're not worthy. And
Yeah.
so that's another way to start overcoming burnout is to, maybe you can't be a positive light for other people because that's just not the point that you're at, but it's starting to take the steps to be a light for yourselves or to turn
Yeah.
that light on inwardly. And then once you're able to get your light going inside, then that's when you can show it to others, and that's when you'll be able to um see burnout when it's coming towards you, and stop it in its tracks. So
And another thing that helps a lot to overcome burnout is self-care. Now, I think a lot of times when we think about self-care, we think about like a full out mask and I'm doing a body scrub and I have to do this and get a massage and all of this like fancy stuff. And that might be what it looks like for some people. You got money if it is. You got money. But I mean, that's a good way to take care of yourself as well. But it could even be, I know sometimes for me, when I get off of work or if I'm at home doing nothing, it can even be going for a drive, 10-minute drive, just to clear your mind, or reading a book, or spending time with your friends, taking care of yourself. It doesn't have to be a physical, even though it can be nice to have a mask, throw a mask on before you go to bed or something like that. It's also important that we use self-care mentally, and make sure we're taking our care of ourselves. I know sometimes when I need self-care, I'll call one of my friends and be like, let's go to dinner. I just need to talk. And we'll talk and I feel it's almost like I put a mask on. Like I feel completely just kind of detoxed from whatever I was stressed about.
mhm.
Or I know when I go on my 10-minute drive, I feel immediately better. And that kind of seems like something small, but sometimes your self-care is going to be small.
Mhm.
It might be going to your parents' house, talking to your parents, or spending time with your kids, or even just turning off your TV in your room and just like sitting in silence and just having that moment to yourself to recharge your mind.
Mhm. Yeah. I know for me, like, so self-care for me has been so difficult because when I tell you I was that person that was trying to do all the things, and that person who thought that, if I can do 10 things that, I'm looking great, when really, if you'll do 10 things, you'll do them halfway decent when you could do 5 things incredibly. Um,
Yeah.
and so I have been that person. I've been working on coming out of not being that person. I was, working literally all day, not getting up from my computer, just sitting at my laptop to where when I got out of my chair, I was getting up like my grandma who probably needs knee surgery, like I will literally like just sit at my computer
Throwing up her business.
and
Sorry.
not eat. Like I would like be not eating lunch. And I'm like, why am I over here still gaining the quarantine 40 pounds and I'm not eating lunch? Well, because I'm throwing my whole immune system out of whack because I'm not taking care of myself properly and eating when I should eat. And so it self-care is literally even like just the smallest, tiniest things of me just, stepping away from my laptop for 15 to 30 minutes to just stop and breathe and maybe go walk outside, or stop and breathe and eat, just like the little things for yourself will add up to the big things. And it's
Yeah.
hard to get into the habit of self-care. I'm gonna be honest with y'all, working out, what is that? I played basketball in college. I had a I couldn't tell you the last time I like legitimately worked out like I should. So that's still on my list of, positive self-care, positive release so that I don't get burnt out. Right now, I'm just trying to remember to eat lunch, honestly. So, everyone's at their own pace and their own level. Don't think, like Khaliah said, that you have to be doing these huge things like going to spas and like all this kind of stuff. If you literally only have time in everything that you're doing to take 10 minutes for yourself and just
Yeah.
breathe and not look at a screen or not look at something, that's doing something good for you. And don't feel bad about it. Don't feel
Yeah.
like it's insignificant because it's the best thing that you could ever possibly do for yourself. Um,
And it can be
that's
challenging too, just because I know for me, I talked about how burnout felt normal to me. So it was normal for me to be like, oh, I'm getting 3 hours of sleep. Or I'm super stressed about this. And that's like probably what's keeping me up at night. Right. And
mhm,
so I have always been that way where I'm like, I can run off of literally, if I went to sleep for an hour last night, like I'm ready for the day. Even though that's not the best thing for me. So even learning that self-care, sometimes when you're in burnout and you've been doing it for years and you've been feeling it for years, you're just kind of like, I have been taking care of myself. Like I'm just like that. That because that was my thing. I'm like, I just get 2 hours of sleep. Like that doesn't matter. But when I did take those moments to take care of myself, to read that book or kind of read my Bible and recharge, I noticed a big difference in my attitude, in my work ethic too, honestly. So you don't realize how much of an impact self-care has until you start practicing it.
mhm,
So um, I would just encourage you guys to start practicing one thing that you really enjoy, even if it's just for 5 minutes. Just start doing that once a week, or if you have time, like multiple times a week, just to see how much it impacts you and your life.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and then, oh,
And if I say nothing else, if I don't ever do a podcast ever again, I'm just joking out. But if I the last thing I say tonight, like don't ever like for me, like my biggest thing is in like you don't ever underestimate the benefit of starting your day with a prayer. Like I will tell you, my days are so different when I start my day with a prayer versus when I don't. And so the power of prayer is so important. The Bible tells us to pray without ceasing for a reason because it just guards us so much in everything that we're going to be doing for today. So that's like if that's your way of self-care, if all you can do right now is just start your day with a prayer for self-care or just open your Bible for a little bit for self-care, even if it's for 5-10 minutes in the
mhm.
morning because you're just so busy with the rest of the day, that can cover you so much. Like
Yeah,
and obviously like if you like have other things going on, like a lot of times burnout and we have stress and anxiety because we have certain things that we need to deal with and talk to a therapist about. Obviously like we want to make sure that you're making time for that. Like we said in our other podcast, like God gave us therapists for a reason. So if you need to go that route and just talk to sometimes you don't have, like I'm an only child, I don't always have a sister to go or a brother to go talk to. I got Khaliah because she's my cousin and she's awesome, but not everybody is as tight with their family like that. So
yeah,
if you really have to go and talk to someone about the stress that you're going through on your job or things like that, like I encourage you, like pray in the morning, like start your day off with a prayer. But if you need to go speak to a therapist too, go and talk to them, tell them what's going on, tell them all your tasks that are going on and about your dog, that just everything's about them. Just talk to them. That's what
yeah.
they're there for. But I digress.
Yeah, it's definitely important to have someone to talk to, and that's a form of self-care as well. Talking to someone, whether it be a therapist or a friend or a family member, it really helps you decompress from what's making you tired or making you anxious. Another way we can overcome self-care is learning to let go of what is not in your control.
Yeah. And we talk so much about that, so we won't even go get into it again. But just like we said before, worry about today, don't worry about tomorrow. Pray over those emails if you're sending them. That's my go-to. But yeah, just remember that you can only control what you output. And once it's out there, that's where God's controlling you too, but that's really where he steps in because you have no control over how other people deal with what you put out.
I also wanted to say, and this kind of goes with the prayer piece. Sometimes we're experiencing burnout. And like we said earlier, we kind of pray for God to get us out of a certain situation. Um, and sometimes He is telling us to let go of things. So just make sure that I wanted to end this with communication with God is just so very important. Not only can it help you overcome burnout, like we said, the prayer and everything, but also reading your word, it ministers to you in such a special way. So I just wanted to reiterate that as we come to a close.
I do want to clarify. I know I said earlier you don't have control over what you put out. I say that with some considerations. Obviously, like I'm not just sending out random emails that have like 100 million typos and all that kind of stuff. Like
Yeah.
we obviously have control over ourselves and we do what we can do to make sure that what we're saying is not rude or, that we're coming across in the best way possible. But obviously still once it's out there, we don't always have control over how people see it, even if it is the best thing that we're putting forward. So I definitely wanted to clear that up. I'm not saying just go out there saying any kind of thing, but
Use your discernment.
yes, we use your discernment.
Yeah.
Anyways, email us, what you want us to talk about next, tell me to watch what I'm saying. Like and subscribe us on Facebook, YouTube, above all things, and share today's episode with your friends.
And always remember that no matter what you're facing, God is forever, will forever be above all things.
Yeah. Bye.